So we had the Mamba X with the 5700 Castle, and it's a 2S, 3S motor. We dabbled with 4S and then eventually tried 6S, and it didn't like it. So I took the motorcycle apart. I took the Castle 5700 out. I put the Spectrum 3800 back in it. Drove it on 3S. It went 44.5. Took the Spectrum out. Put a Castle 6400, 1412 6400 in it. It has a 5mm pinion, which didn't clear the case, so I had to put a hole in it, which you'll see in the video. You can't really see on the motorcycle. You might be able to see it, but I doubt it. So stick with me till after the intro, and I'll show you the whole process. Nothing to it. No BEC, no nothing. Mamba X and a motor. Hang with me.
1. Let's get started.
$6,400 kV Castle. I think it's a 1412, yeah. So we're gonna take this apart. First we're gonna get the right bit. So I'm gonna take the bike apart in real time. So if you need to take yours apart and do the same thing with me, go ahead. There's not a lot to do what I'm doing. I'm replacing the stock motor with the Castle motor. I already have a Mamba X in this motorcycle, and I've already put leads on the Castle 1412-64. So once I get it out and get the stock motor out, I will be able to just put the motor in, plug the motor up, and plug the sensor wire up, and we should be good. I've got the plastic side panel almost off, and then I will take the metal side chassis plate off, and then I'll swing around the other side, take the cover off the pinion, remove the pinion, remove the motor bolts, and then take the motor out and disconnect it and start putting it back together. The two little screws that hold your receiver is like a 2mm. The rest of them are 2.5, and then the screw that holds the lean bar is a 3mm. So I get the side plastic panel off, and there's chain lube, which kind of surprised me, but you know, it's going to be there if you lube your chain. So I just kept going. The screws in your receiver are the smallest at 2mm. I'll show you the Allen wrench here in just a second if you can see it. And then I show you the 2.5mm Allen that are the screws in the rest of the side plate. So the chain will not come off if you haven't loosened your rear tire. Like if you take your sprocket loose and you take your set pin out and you try to pull it to the edge, it will not come off. You got to take your rear tire loose, push it up, put slack in the chain, and then it'll come off. So don't even try. It ain't happening. I mean, I'm sure you could, but you're probably going to damage your chain. And there's just no reason. It's really easy for me to just keep everything kind of grouped together. So when I'm putting it all back together, it's just kind of a reverse order. I'm not really scrounging for anything. In this case, where I know the motor's too long for the side plates, and I know that the output shaft is too long. So we're going to have to address both those issues, but that's when we're putting it all back together, and that's at the end. So we'll worry about that then. I definitely recommend getting an impact of some sort, even if it's just a power screwdriver. It doesn't necessarily have to be an impact driver, but it really takes it off your fingers and your wrists and your elbows, all that turning. I do a lot of stuff by hand when I'm putting it together, maybe when I'm taking it apart, depending on what it is and how many times I've done it, and that kind of thing. But really need to get you some kind of power tool to disassemble, even if you just use it for disassembling. I just shown you the receiver. The receiver, everything's labeled where everything goes, so you don't have to worry about getting anything in the wrong place. If you're wondering why I don't have a BEC, it's because the Mamba X has a built-in BEC 8 amp, and it works great. So I don't think there's a reason for an external BEC when you're using a Mamba X or any ESC that has an internal BEC that's 8 amps or more. Here I'm removing the pinion cover. I already had a 24 tooth pinion on this motorcycle, which is 4 teeth up from stock. So I'm getting the motor screws out. Well, actually, I'm taking the fairing off so I can take the pinion off. If you haven't had a chance to like or subscribe, I appreciate it if you do. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm not really doing this to get famous or make any money or do anything like that. I just kind of like making videos, and I really like working on RCs, and the videos, inspire me to work on the RCs, and the RCs inspire me to make the videos, and watching the end result's pretty cool. So I appreciate everybody that's subscribing and watching, and let me know what you want to see. If you want to see more motorcycles, and I'll double down on the motorcycles. If you want to see the speed run car, or you want to see bashing, let me know. I got some bashers. So now I'm taking the motor screws out, and I'll get the motor screws out and I'll swing the bike around and we'll pull the motor out. We'll pull the ESC out and unplug the motor. I've got the other motor handy, so I'll plug it in, might stick it in first, and then, get it tightened down, get the pinion on it, that kind of thing. So we got to add a sensor wire. So I've got a sensor wire laying over here. I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to cut the sheath off of it because it's a little long. I think it's about a 4-inch or maybe 6-inch. And I also have a bead link I'm going to put in. There's the sensor wire. And maybe it's a little longer, 8-inch. I'm going to cut the sheath off of it so then I can fold it up real nice and zip tie it and tape it to where it's this length I want, and then put it all in the motorcycle. So even though we don't have a lot of space, if you have the right stuff, like the Mamba X is perfect size for the motorcycle. It's up to a 6S CSC. It's like it's designed for a Mamba X, in my opinion. I'm cutting the sheath, starting a cut, and then pulling it apart because it's soft enough that it'll rip. You got to be careful because you don't want to pull them wires out of that sensor plug on either side. So I make sure that I've got it good and started before I start kind of pulling on the wires, which I don't pull on the plug at all. So once I've got the sheath off, well, then you've got these wires, you see, and I'll show you. They're all just free, like separate. So it's real easy to fold it up and make it about how long you think you want it. And I'm going to put a zip tie around the bigger bundle, and then if I have a long tail, because I have to get to the sensor plug coming out of the Mamba X, and I'll put a piece of electrical tape around the tail to kind of keep those wires from getting separated. You really want to just take your time when you're doing something like this, because it's not going to go exactly like you want it to, because number one, the motor's too big. It's not going to fit, or it does fit, but you got to modify the side pieces and the pinion cover. And so, in trying to make as much room as possible, you shorten your leads, your wires are not necessarily shortened but bunched together to make as much room as possible. And you're still going to be cramming a little bit of wires. You're just going to be putting them in the open space. When I'm plugging these sensor wires in, I always look at the distance in the plug because the pins are either low or high because they're not in the center. So that's the first thing I look at, where the pins are. And then, because you don't want to bend a pin, break a pin off. You definitely don't want to break a pin off, but like you don't want to bend, you don't want to do any of that, because then you got to get another whatever, replace it, and that's time. So just take your time, make sure everything's like it's supposed to be, and things will just go smoothly. Here I'm putting that little piece of electrical tape on that long leg of that little sensor wire harness that I kind of made, and just going to kind of tuck it and push it in there and tuck everything in there. When you get ready to put your chassis plate on, well, here I'm plugging the motor into the ESC and then going to put the motor in the motorcycle, put the motor screws in it, and then the pinion and mesh, and then go from there. My Allen drivers are flat on the back, so I can stand them up, put the Allen screw on it, and then pick the Allen driver up if I need to, if I've only got one hand. Just a little tip. So my plan is to take a body hole reamer and put a hole in the pinion cover where the 5mm shaft will be sticking out, because it's longer than the stock shaft, and the stock shaft's 3.17, so it's bigger around and it's longer. So my plan is to take a body reamer and put a hole there. Hopefully I'll gauge it right, but we'll see. That was the new 5mm 24 tooth Robinson Racing pinion that I got. I put a little bit of Loctite on my set screw in my pinion, just to keep it from wiggling out. I had a 24 tooth pinion on the 5700 Castle that I had in it, which was 3.17 shaft, and then I had it on the stock motor too. So I think 24s is about as high as you can go without slotting the motor slots and taking off a piece of plastic that holds the cover on right there. I'm setting my mesh here by feel. I usually get a piece of paper and put in between the pinion and the spur, and then, pull it tight and tighten it up, which I'm about to get a piece of paper and run through it before I'm done with it. But I'm about to get started on the pinion cover. I was super close with my hole, but I was off to one side just a little bit, so I'm going to have to take a file and open up one side of the hole. slap the screw in that pinion cover and call it done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try to, route my wires, make sure nothing's tangled up, get my sensor wire routed where it's not, tight or in a bind nowhere, get all my connections, steering, brake, auxiliary, gyro, what's the other one, throttle, and get all them pulled through the little square in the chassis plate and go from there. You want to make sure all your connections are good, all your plugs are good, all your solder joints are good, because when you get it all crammed in this motorcycle, it's something's bound to pull apart, or if a weak joint, it's going to, flex and break off. So, just take your time and make sure everything's like it should be. If you don't cut any corners now, then you won't have any problems later. I'm adding this not BEC, but I'm adding this B-Link so I can, tune the ESC and the motor from my phone. And I like gadgets, and my Kawasaki's got a hobby wing set up with it with a OTA programmer on it, and I can change stuff on it around, and it's really cool. I like that, option of being able to mess with stuff, so I'm going to throw the B-Link in there. I had it in here when I had the 5700, but I never really messed with it. I just kept putting more cells to it until I messed the motor up. So I'm going to mess with the B-Link a little bit more on this setup on 2S and 3S. So I basically just take the chassis plate and run all my wires through the little hole, throw the bearing up on the sprocket shaft, and push it on. Well, here I'm cleaning all the chain lube off the chassis plate, just kind of making sure there's not any dirt or grime on it, especially around that bearing. But then I'm just going to feed all the wires through that one hole, and then stick it up on the shaft and push it on. And then once I get it on and get the chassis plate tightened down, I'll take the receiver and plug everything in and attach the receiver. The good part is that none of my plugs are the same. Like, my steering is red, white, and black. My brakes are yellow, red, and brown. My flywheel of part of the gyro signals white and black. My powered gyro that goes with the accessory one is red and black. And then my ESC through the B-Link is also yellow, red, and brown, but the way that the wires are routed, it's on the other side of the motorcycle kinda, so there's no way to get them confused. And once you get that chassis plate pushed on that sprocket shaft right there, as you can see, it pretty much stays. And then you just start putting your screws in. The longest screw goes through the seat battery compartment, And then, you know, just put your screws in. I like to get the longest screw in the seat, and then I'll get the screw in the aluminum piece that's at the very front that connects the two sides, and then I'll put a screw in the bottom. And once you get those three in the chassis plate, well, it's in, and you just put the rest of the screws in. Here I'm plugging the receiver up, and of course, you know, each port is labeled. When I change the ESCs out, I cut the power plug off the stock ESC that plugs into the gyro power, and then I wire it to whatever I'm doing. If I'm just using a stock internal BEC, then I'll wire that plug to like a servo plug to be able to plug in the ESC, into the receiver. And but yeah, I have a BEC in my Kawasaki because that XR10 Pro only has a 4 amp BEC, so I have to have an external one. But I won't do that again. Everything will have at least an 8 amp BEC in it, and then that does away with the external BEC. Here in just a second, when I get the receiver all hooked up, I will bench test it, get my radio, hook a battery up, turn everything on, make sure everything works, and then put it the rest of the way apart. And then once I got it all together, and put it the rest of the way together, and then once I got it all together, I'll bench test it again, make sure the gyro works, make sure everything works. Put these 2mm screws in the receiver and in the receiver ground, and then we should bench test it, I believe. I would have normally tested the gyro, but I guess I just forgot. But I'll test it once I get it all together. So now I'm gonna put the sprocket on and the chain, the back wheel. Once I get that on, I can put the side plastic plates on, which I'm gonna have to modify for the back of the motor. And that'll be it. I'm doing just a little bit of cleanup real quick. Notice that the table's dirty from everything, falling, shaking loose from this thing being run outside. So once I get everything cleaned up, we'll be right back to it. Just like anything, this thing's got an order of operation where if you do things in a certain order, it'll be much easier. And it's like that, taking it apart and putting it together. And once you get those little things down, it's really quite simple to work on. I heard the new Supermoto had a different rear axle. It's not a pin with a nut on it. It's an aluminum piece inside the wheel, and then there's 2 screws in each side of the rear wheel, and then you can set your chain tension. And you have to take one screw out and then take an Allen and put inside the wheel and then take the other screw out to be able to get the wheel off. From my understanding, I haven't seen one in person yet. I'm going to take this shock guard, and it just pops in one side, and then there's like a little spot on the other side. It slides through. Then there's a hole that lines up, and you put a screw through it, and that holds that in. Just as I thought, the side plate's not really even close to going on, but you know, the way these side plates are made, there's an indentation for the back of the motor and like a cooling port for air to go through, and I'm just going to cut that. First, I'm going to take a drill and I'm going to drill some holes in it, and then I'm going to take a Dremel and I'm just going to cut it out the way I think it needs to be. I'm sure it's going to take a couple times before it's like I want it. I drilled holes inside the circle around the perimeter, as you can see, and now I'm going to cut that out. Quick trip to the garage, and with the Dremel I cut out what I wanted to. As you can see, it's kind of squared off a little bigger than I thought it was going to be, but to clear the tabs on the motor and everything, that's how big it has to be. And I get it on and get it all bolted up, and it looks like I got to use the file here for a second and just kind of open it up. I'm going to do that and get it all on, and then we'll be back. When you're doing something like this, you really can't be afraid to open holes up, make holes. If you don't have files and you're messing with plastic or metal or even wood, you need to get some files, because you really can tweak holes and do things with files that, you know, really make things easy that wouldn't be, you know, as easy if you didn't have a file. So if you don't have any files, that's something to think about getting. Sometimes it takes the elbow grease. Looks like we're ready to bench test it, so let's see what happens. Well, the bench test went great. Everything worked just like it's supposed to. Sounds good. Looks really good for the throttle I gave it. So now on to putting the fairings back on it. Now when you're putting these plastics on, I want y'all to be mindful that like when you're using the screws and the screws get mixed up, if you've got a long screw and you put it in one of these plastics and you put it through and it goes in too far, well, that might keep you from putting your battery in because it's sticking into the battery compartment. So when you're putting your plastics on, after you put your plastics on, test fit a battery, so then when you get to where you're going, if you don't take tools with you, then you can drive your motorcycle. Because if your battery won't go in the battery door and you don't have any Allens, well, then you can't take them, loosen them up or take them out, and then you won't be able to drive and it's a wasted trip. So something to think about. So I'm gonna get the man put back on and get his pants pulled up and get him locked down, get his upper half put on him, get his hands on the handlebars and the screws in and the pin through them with the clip in it. And then I'm going to take 3 little zip ties and I'm going to pull them down to the handlebars and I'm going to zip tie them around his neck to the handlebar mount. And he's going to look like he's getting it, which is how I like him to look. And it should be done. I want to thank everybody for watching and liking and subscribing. And if you haven't, please go ahead and do so. It's free. If you don't want to, that's fine too. Don't matter. I can't wait to test this thing out, see how fast it's going to go, getting that B-link, put some timing in it. I think my hobby wing picked up 6 miles an hour on 40 degrees of timing. So I'm interested to see how the Castle setup does. And won't be long. Thanks for watching, guys. I've had more people ask me how I got my man to stay crouched down, and I'm about to show y'all the secret. 3 little zip ties. I wish I could find some gold ones to make it look like he had a chain on. I might try to do that tomorrow. But 3 zip ties around the neck, push them on down. I like for them to just be almost touching the handlebars. The handlebars don't turn, so it really doesn't matter. I guess the lower the better. But that's it. Like I said, I really appreciate you everybody watching. I can't wait to see how fast this thing goes. I'm expecting 70s on 3S. I know their bike's going faster, but I really like them to look stock and act stock, but run 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So we'll see. We're going to keep on. Thanks for watching. And until next time, guys, I really appreciate everybody.